How's it going, everybody? My name is Ryan, aka Blackbeard TCG. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day, and if not, hopefully I can make it a little bit better. Now look, today we are talking about Film Kid. Yes, that is right, the Film Green package with Kid. It is actually really good, and it's super fun to play, and I highly recommend everybody at least try it once. It's super fun. But before we get into it and break it down and all that good stuff, I have to give a shout out to Teru. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I apologize if I'm not. Teru was the first person that I seen that put together a really solid Film Kid deck, so I have to give credit where credit's due, because it definitely inspired me to start building my own, playing around with it, and I have my own version that I will be sharing on Patreon, as well as gameplay videos as well. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead, check the link down in the description. But with that being said, Teru's build, it really sparked something in a lot of people. As you can see here, it was 110 people at this tournament, ended up going 4-2, took a loss to Whitebeard, and then after Swiss lost to Kid as well. So it's pretty good. In terms of other people playing it, shoutouts to Adrian. I believe Adrian played in the Singapore tournament with 408 players, and went 7-1 with his version of the build, which we'll go over as well, losing to Kid and then also losing to Kaido. And I believe that he was the only, or I think there was one other person in the top 16 playing Kid, and that was with Film Kid. So I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's the case. He gave reference to Teru as well for inspiration. Then over here we also have Naka, who also played it, performing really well at their locals, beat Kinemon, beat Red Green Law, and then also beat Whitebeard with their version of the build. And of course, giving credit to Teru once again. So I think a lot of people have all got inspiration from Teru, so we have to give credit where credit is due. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the initial build that Teru put out there. We'll talk about some of the other builds that we've seen that have been performing really well, and then talk about why the deck is exactly working and why the ideas come about. So in this version, we got 4 Jewelry Bonnies, we have 4 Chopper, we have 4 Scratch Manapoo, 4 Izo, 4 Usopp, 4 Nami, 4 Brook, 4 Zoro, 4 Frankie, 4 Basil Hawkins, 4 Luffy, 2 7-cost Kid, and 4 Paradise Waterfall. If we take a look at Adrian's build, it's relatively similar. He's running 4 of all the main film cards, right? We see the Zoro, we see Usopp, we see where's Chopper? Chopper's down there. We see Nami, we see Brook, we see Luffy, right? That's a standard core. Of course, you have your Scratch Manapoo. You also have your Jewelry Bonnie, your 4 Paradise Waterfall. But for his build, where it starts to differ is there's no Izo, but instead rather to have the 4 copies of Punk Gibson to be able to rest stuff, which is actually pretty interesting and something that I want to talk about. But then also, what else is different? Instead of playing 4 copies of the X-Drake, sorry, not X-Drake, Basil Hawkins, opting for Repel instead, which is quite interesting. And then also playing 3 copies of Blocker Law, which is also very interesting as well. If we take a look at Naka's list, also playing copies of Law, playing copies of 7-drop Kid, and then everything else is pretty much standard from what we've seen with the other one, the 4 Paradise Waterfall. The only difference for Naka's build is playing the X-Drake, 3 copies of X-Drake. So as you can see, the core cards are there. And this, again, this video is to make you guys draw inspiration. You guys can play around with your own builds. For example, and again, I'll have my version on Patreon. One of the things that I've been playing around with and testing, because I also have found a lot of struggle against Whitebeard, but I think that Adrian might have figured out the tech, which we'll talk about in a bit. But as you can see, Teru lost both matchups to Whitebeard. And for me, the game can go super grindy, because if you're going up against Whitebeard, you need to have your 6,000 power units. So ideally you want to have your Zoro. If you play your Frankie, you don't ideally want to play Frankie against Whitebeard from what I've found. But if you could play your Frankie, obviously he's an offensive weapon for you there. You want to have 6k body units in order to swing into your opponent, in order to make them chip away at their life. But then obviously if they're playing the Moby Dick version, then they get faster to that win con, which sucks. So sometimes you have to play the slow pace game. So it's you can't predict what your opponent's playing, right? If they're playing the Moby Dick version, then like you have to change your play style. If they're playing, if they're not playing the Moby Dick version and they're playing like the Straw Hat version, then it's a completely different play style. So I'm still trying to figure out Whitebeard. I definitely would say, in my opinion, at least from testing, Whitebeard is this deck's hardest matchup, which does make it difficult because Whitebeard might be a really popular deck in set 2 going forward, but we'll see how things develop. I think that there's tech to make this deck really good. For me, I was thinking about teching in Yamato, Yamato being 6,000 power, 4 cost, being able to rest Marco is really, really strong, and then being 6k to swing on subsequent turns, so you could use it in order to rest Marco to set up for your other plays, but then also you could use it on the offensive end when needed. So I feel like it has a little bit of versatility, doesn't have counter, not really searchable, so because you're not playing Momonosuke, so I don't know, it might not be the best, but we'll see. We're still testing. So one thing I want to talk about with Adrian's build is that with Adrian, he's running 4 copies of the Punk Gibson. And Punk Gibson, I was thinking, is actually really, really good, right? Because if we can successfully use the Punk Gibson, then we can just rest the Marco, which is really huge because, again, Marco is going to be the biggest deterrent because it's going to be able to continuously come back, and you don't really want to KO it. Like, you don't really want to attack it twice, right? Because, like, you could just attack it twice and maybe get off the board, but then maybe they just have, like, another Moby Dick in hand and then it comes back. And then they discard something else and it comes back. Like, maybe they have a Squirt in hand and it comes back, right? Like, they don't mind ditching those cards, and you're just like, oh my god, I could have went face. Because if I went face and those were, like, 2 dead cards in their hand anyway that they wouldn't have been able to block, could have got a hit off. You know what I mean? So, like, those type of situations, it really, really sucks. It really, really hurts. Which is why, if you're in a situation where you do have to play Izo, it's not the worst because Izo can rest 4 costs, so I don't mind it that way. And then, of course, it's 2k counter. But then I was like, okay, Punk Gibson is 4k counter, which is really good when you're going up against Whitebeard, because Whitebeard obviously can get really pumped up towards the end of the game. So being able to have 4k counter is really nice. But then also you can rest Marco, so when it comes back to your turn, you don't even have to worry about him. So I think I'm going to adapt this. I'm going to steal this because my version of the build was not playing this. So I'm definitely going to put that in and test that out. So those are the lists. Those are my early thoughts. Those are like the different things. Of course, Naka's build is running the X-Drakes. For me, I think X-Drake definitely has a place. I could see it being used. Obviously, it has that 6,000 power line, which is what we want in order to go up against Whitebeard as well, which again, I think is probably the toughest matchup. But I don't know. I tried it. I'm not a big fan. Like, part of me feels like, oh, I feel like I should just run Yamato, but then Yamato doesn't have counter. And then, like, X-Drake actually KOs it. So, I don't know. It's tough. Again, we're still in the testing phase for me, but these are the lists. And if you take a look at Naka, Naka was able to beat Kinemon, Red Green Law, and Whitebeard. These are all meta decks. Again, if we look at Adrian, Adrian was able to take down Z, who's been seeing a lot more play, take down Kinemon, take down Kaido, take down Luffy, lost the Kid, took out Smoker, took out Kinemon, took out Zoro, and then took out Zoro, and then lost to Kaido. So, did not have to go up against any Whitebeard, which is surprising. So, I wonder how his list would go up against Whitebeard. Because, again, I think Whitebeard is tough for this deck. Well, that being said, why does this work, right? Like, what's the game plan? How do you play it? All those good things. Okay, Paradise Waterfall is really straightforward, standard. You're able to restand your 7-cost Kid, and you're able to restand your 7-cost Luffy, right? It works in both senses. It's this is 7,000 power. You can use him on the offensive end, especially 7-drop Kid. He just restands himself at the end of the turn. You can block with it. Paradise Waterfall, you can block with it again. It's just really, really good in order to set those up. Of course, not 8-cost Kid, 7-cost Kid is very self-explanatory. I kind of just alluded to that there. 7-cost Luffy is self-explanatory as well. Blocker, can use it on offense if you need, because it's 7k. But more importantly, he allows you to bring out Brook, and then Brook allows you to bring out Usopp, or allows you to be cheeky and bring out Nami. Nami on play can let you search. And now let's talk about Nami, because Nami is really, really good in the early game. You really want to abuse it, keep her protected, and like she could just funnel you cards off cooldown. It's so good. Being able to search your 2k counter and Chopper, being able to search your Zoro. By the way, talking about searching with Zoro, Jewelry Bonnie. Jewelry Bonnie allows you to get Supernova. What are our Supernova targets? Well, if you play this version, you can go ahead and pick up Basil Hawkins. If you're playing the version that Naka was using, you can go ahead and pick up your X-Drake. Of course, you can pick up your 7-cost Kid, but then you can also pick up your 7-cost Luffy. So you have a ton of targets there. Again, obviously, you could search for Zoro, swing with Zoro that way. Nami's just really good because you're able to just pick up the cards that you need for the situation. Of course, we all know how strong 5-cost 7,000 power units are. We see with Virgo, we see with Babanuki, these vanillas are actually really, really strong. We see with Kingdu, right? Kingdu is one of the most powerful cards in Whitebeard. So having access to this is really good. Obviously, it's matchup dependent. Sometimes on curve, if you could play, you have no other plays, it's really nice to play, but I found myself personally using it a lot more as just like a free 1k counter, but there's definitely use for it. Obviously, Usopp is a unit that can come on board very easily through Brook. You attach one Dawn to him, he can start swinging into Whitebeard, which is really, really nice. And so everything just starts coming together, right? It all makes sense. So why pick Kid as the leader now, right? So the reason why you would pick Kid as a leader is because Kid allows you to be really aggressive. The game plan is actually relatively simple. You continue to generate a lot of advantage, whether it's through your Jewelry Bonnie or whether it's through your Nami. You get to a point where you can start swarming the board. You can drop 7-cost Luffy into Brook, into Usopp, or into Nami. Then all of a sudden you have a bunch of units on board that you can all swing. Then on offense now, if you want to go with Kid on the next turn, you can go ahead and swing with Kid. If you get to the late game, he can be like 10k, restand, 10k, attached onto other characters, swing. With Nami, search, like you just get so much advantage. You could really, really just be super aggressive. I feel like the deck has a lot of versatility because of how it's built. If you need to play the Zoro, if you need to play the Frankie, it's really good for early aggression. So I feel like the deck is just very, very well rounded, and Kid as a leader having the threat to swing twice is what makes this deck work, right? Like if you took this same list and used any other green leader, you would not have as much success as you would with Kid. Like Kid just makes it feel so good because you always have the threat of that double hit. And because you have all these vanillas, because you're able to bring out other characters, you're cheating characters out as well, whether it be with Brook or whether it be with Luffy, you're not using Dawn to play those characters. So instead, you use that Dawn to swing again, right? So you're getting an extra attack because of that. So it's really good in terms of synergy. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend you guys play around. Try out some of these lists yourself. See if you like it. Again, I'll be posting my list on Patreon. But I just wanted to bring this to your attention to let you guys know that the film package is pretty damn good. So that being said, let me know in the comment section below. Have you guys already been playing around with this? Did you guys think that the film package was kind of underwhelming like I did? I'll be honest, I was really disappointed because, like, obviously I was thinking that the film cards are supposed to be for Sanji, but then I was like, Sanji is supposed to be for vanilla, so this is so pointless. But again, shout out to Teru for putting this together because it really put it on the map, and this is one of the most fun decks to pilot at OPO2. With that being said, I am out. Peace.